Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this breaking news edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. We've got recruiting info to talk about with you guys today, but right now, myself and Shea Dixon will be talking about Jack Bech, LSU wide receiver, entering the transfer portal. Big news. We posted it on thebengaltiger.com over the weekend on Friday. We heard this news was a possibility. We hadn't heard it had changed. We were just kind of waiting to hear what happened after the exit interviews with Brian Kelly. And sure enough, Tuesday around lunch, a little after lunch, Jack Bech, the former St. Thomas More star, announced he is entering the transfer portal. And Shea, this is news that doesn't really come of a surprise, but still a fan favorite, a guy who had a terrific run in 2021 as a true freshman. He's on the move and looking for a new home now.
It's not a total shock, but I also asked Matthew on the prior podcast, or someone asked us in the mailbag, and I said, look, I could see it, but again, I could see him staying because of his passion for LSU, being a Lafayette kid, wanting to always play at LSU. And when he announced he was going to go ahead and enter the portal, Billy, he mentioned all of those things. He said, it's the toughest decision I've ever made. I grew up an LSU fan. I always wanted to play for the Tigers. But essentially, he said that he's looking for a role elsewhere that kind of suits, I guess, kind of where he's at this point in his career as a junior. You'll remember 2021, which was his first year. He comes in after the COVID season, plays a full year. What was he? Let's see. Number 1 on the team in catches with 43. Number 3 on the team in receiving yards, but only about 20 yards behind Kayshawn and Jure. Kayshawn only played 6 games. Caught a few touchdowns. Everything looked like it was he had inserted himself firmly into the future plans. They had also kind of messed around with him at tight end. This year they didn't do that. They went with Mason Taylor. So he became a full-time receiver, no doubt. And really, he slipped behind not just Malik and Kayshawn and Jure, and Brian Thomas emerged and became an even better player as a sophomore. Mason Taylor obviously got involved in the passing game, but Billy, Kyron Lacey, Chris Hilton when he was healthy, there were guys getting reps out there where Besh was on the back end of things in what wasn't a very deep receiver room. So production-wise, you can't be surprised. He's talented enough to play in the SEC. I firmly believe that. He showed it as a true freshman. Now as a junior, 2 full years of experience. I think he can play about anywhere he wants. It's just that per normal, LSU's receiver room is very deep, and we'll have to see ultimately what it looks like a year from now. But I think Kayshon Boutte returning makes it all that much more deep because he's the one guy that's going to be on the field more than anybody else, which ultimately cuts down on your rotations. So not a massive shocker, but again, a guy who wanted to be a Tiger. I'm surprised in a way he's leaving, but I also completely understand it.
Yeah, I think with Jack, I mean, you look at a guy that came out of St. Thomas More who's super productive, didn't necessarily, and people are going to flame me probably, but didn't necessarily have the insane speed and change of direction that you wanted, but he was a ball winner. He won contested catches. We saw that throughout his career, at LSU when he had opportunities to do that, especially as a freshman.
He and Walker Howard were unstoppable together that year they went to a state title.
Exactly. And so he had a role and he had opportunities. I just think with the progression of a Malik Neighbors, or Brian Thomas, and some of those guys, like you said, he just kind of fell behind a little bit. He's going to find a place that probably will use him a little bit better, or maybe he has a better chance of getting on the field just in general, because it's just more of a kind of a niche spot for him. He wasn't big enough to play tight end and block on the end line. Because he wanted to play wide out, and LSU thought he was a wide receiver too. So just kind of one of those tough marriages. There wasn't anything wrong with Jack Bech and Brian Kelly. He was at SEC Media Days over the summer. So I wish Jack all the best. He's one of the good guys out there that you cover in recruiting. Spent a lot of time covering him and Walker Howard, as they went through their processes. So best of luck to Jack. And, that's just kind of the day and age of the portal right now, affording him an opportunity to go somewhere else without losing a year of eligibility.
And no doubt. And look, it's you said it. The reality was he was one of the 3 guys that went to media days. He was one of the, I don't know how many SWAT teams they had, 8, something like that, 10, but he was one of the SWAT team leaders. So the staff very much held him in high regard in terms of what he brought to the team. And look, we saw him on punt returns, we saw him on kickoffs, we saw him, at different spots beyond just playing receiver. And there were injuries and everything that probably slowed him a good bit, but it all comes back to me. If Kayshawn's back and you really don't lose anybody else, you've got a really talented room. It doesn't have 13, 14 guys in it, but everybody that's in it is kind of knocking on the door to play, if not already starting. So I could certainly understand why he wants to go elsewhere, where a lot of teams do not have that luxury, and he would very much be a number one or number two for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So the day after, getting the news that Kayshon Boutte is returning, LSU does lose Jack Bech into the transfer portal. So we will see who else ultimately jumps into the portal for LSU. I know some discussion still going on. We'll be monitoring all of that on thebengaltiger.com. Feel free to jump on board with a Bengal Tiger Founders Club hat, which you get for just $1, as well as your year-long subscription to the Bengal Tiger. Lots to talk about. Shea, a new offer in the transfer portal has gone out. They offered shorter college tight end Kyle Morlock early on as one of the guys that they can get on when that transfer portal window opened. But now LSU has moved on its first FBS offer out of Western Michigan.
I didn't know if that was the end of your thought. I thought you were about to just start reeling off stats and video you had watched to the kid or what. Hey, look, I'll say this. LSU fans were screaming, get us some defensive tackles following the Deron Reed decommitment, even before then, because I think many anticipate Jaquelin Roy will end up going pro. They don't have a ton of depth there beyond Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo, and obviously Jacobian Guillory's a veteran. But after that, you're completely unproven with guys and don't only have a couple left. And we'll have to see what happens after the portal. So as the season went on, it became very clear that Jaquelin and Mekhi were having to carry the load there. You want more depth. This is a guy who's been in college 5 years. He's coming into the portal as a grad student, taking advantage of that COVID pandemic year where nobody got doctor year of eligibility. And I look at kind of his production was off the charts. I think he's got like 150 something career tackles. Basically, this is a kid that after his freshman year has just been starting every season. He's their best defensive lineman, certainly on the interior every year. And he's 6'5", 300 and is probably 23 years old. So they were in this spot a number of times this past class, Billy. You look at all the DBs, I'd have to think about some others, but there were a ton of grad transfers they took because those were guys who brought a wealth of experience. They had been in a college weight room for 4 or 5 years. The transition while going from Western Michigan to the SEC is obviously a jump, but the transition from where they're at in college to where they would want them to be if they were going to actually contribute is not a very big jump. They're sort of already there. So not surprised that the first 2 offers went out to grad transfers, but there will be a wave of, offers to come because we think that they're going to end up in that 8, 9, 10 range of guys they ultimately take. You're going to offer more than that unless you hit on every single guy that you offered. So in the next 45 days, marathon, not a sprint here. The early days are obviously just for feeling guys out, starting to talk to them. More than 1,000 kids went into the portal on day one. And obviously these are all the underclassmen. We're talking about 2 guys that got offered that are grad students, but LSU will hand out underclassmen offers. It'll be very interesting to see the positions they prioritize. We've talked about it a ton, Billy, that corner, D tackle, tight end. They've already addressed a couple of those with an offer at the least. But then best available, look, safety. Matty B did a story on it. He kind of broke things down and even made the case that, hey, they might, if they see a great center out there, which there's buzz that there's kind of connects with the Cincinnati center and others, that maybe you make a move there and you get a little bit stronger despite having someone that played center the entire year returning for you. So we'll see how Brian Kelly and them approach it. We are in the very early stages though, Billy. We're recording this on day 2 and literally no LSU player from this year's roster had even entered yet until right before we got on when Jack Bech went in. So more guys will enter, more guys will get offered, more guys from other schools will enter. Long way to go.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Western Michigan defensive lineman Braden Fisk getting that first offer from LSU and Jamar Cain to play on his defensive line, Can we talk about the transfer portal rumors that have been going about this former 5-star out of A&M and this guy out of Oklahoma or whatever? Well, lo and behold, they go up into the Midwest and offer a guy, from Western Michigan. I just kind of thought that was funny that that's the first offer we've seen, and I'm sure we'll see some other, let's say, maybe bigger name guys pop up, but that's just a guess. That's just kind of a thought that I had, but. The first name that gets offered out of the FBS ranks is a Western Michigan defensive lineman. Pretty kind of funny.
Yeah, and we'll hear more about or I should say, we'll hear about offers that kids don't report. Because I wrote about this on the site yesterday. A number of guys, like you can remember Greg Brooks and those guys, they tweeted out and put out that they were in the transfer portal. And the next tweet, whether it was a few weeks, a month later, whatever, was that they were committed to LSU. Well, LSU wasn't the only school that offered them. They just never put out any offers. And you'll see a lot of that. You even talked to Dominic Lovett's mom, who's a big-time Missouri player that's entering the portal, arguably the best receiver that's currently in the portal. And she gave you the impression that it's like, we field so many phone calls from college coaches that you wouldn't even be able to keep track of, 15, 18, who said we're interested, who said we're offered. It's so unlike high school recruiting in that way, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yep. There's a lot to cover on the transfer portal front, which is the perfect time to bring up before we move into the actual recruiting part of this podcast. That, Shea, we are going to bring you guys a new podcast every week, kind of leading up and through all of this transfer portal craziness. We had, the preview podcast and kind of things like that going during the season. Now that the season's done, we're going to bring you guys a weekly transfer portal podcast. I believe it's going to be on Thursday that we'll be dropping it. And we'll just kind of hash out all the things that we're kind of hearing, maybe new offers. We'll look at those. We'll look at top targets. We'll look at visitors. We'll look at who the coaches are seeing, even some college football news across the country.
Yeah.
We're going to do it all on that podcast. So I'm excited to jump in the saddle with you and maybe Maddie B. We talked about it being kind of the three-headed monster getting back together on that podcast to talk a little bit more transfer each week for you guys.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know our schedule, every Monday, Matthew and I have the Monday mailbag where we take subscriber questions and answer them about the football team. Every Tuesday, you're listening, Billy and I are here talking recruiting. And then every Friday, and then right after games, and then sometimes on Sundays if the game ended at midnight or whatever, we have the preview pod and then the reaction pod. As Billy noted, no more games. So we had 4 podcasts a week. We got cut down to 2. We put our heads together and said, let's at least add one more. Transfer portal is an easy thing to throw in there. So Mondays, you'll get the mailbag. Tuesdays, you'll get the recruiting pod. And then Thursday, Friday, we'll decide on that. You'll get the transfer portal pod.
Yeah, maybe we in the offseason, we start getting guys on the podcast now that the season's over. So hopefully do some longer interviews and things like that. Bring on some of our On3 national guys as well. So housekeeping done. 13 and a half minutes into this edition of the recruiting podcast, Shea, it's now time to talk actual recruiting. And let's lead off with this because we're seeing news start to trickle out. It started Sunday night. LSU assistants Frank Wilson and Cortez Hankton went in home with 4-star wideout commit Kai Prion. And then on Monday, you got Joe Sloan going in home with his quarterback commit, Ricky Collins. And then Brian Kelly and Frank Wilson going in home with Caleb Jackson, their 4-star, one of their 4-star running back commits. Coaches are on the road, and the scoop is about to hit the Bengal Tiger subscribers as they get after these targets. Those will be kind of ones we'll hold for subscribers to the site. Again, $1 for a year. But Shea, they're really getting after it on these in-home visits, and they're starting in Louisiana for the most part.
Yeah, well, and don't forget that their 5-star edge rusher, it's not Louisiana, Deshaun Womack, will get a visit. They did not forget about him, unless you said that, and I just wasn't listening.
I was leaving off the ones out of state that we were going to kind of maybe touch on as we get.
Well, then I won't say all of them, including uncommitted guys, but there, I gave one away for free. There you go. Don't worry, LSU fans. They are going to see your prized B.J. Ojulari heir apparent, Deshaun Womack. I also heard, Billy, and this makes sense, that for this stretch right now, because last week was all about preparing for the SEC championship, everybody else who wasn't in championship games was doing all their exit interviews with kids. So And that means NFL draft, portal, underclassmen who are going nowhere, where you just meet with them about, your progress, what you want to see out of you in the offseason, all that. They all had that last week. So LSU's doing that this week. It's Tuesday right now. So Monday, Tuesday, they're wrapping those up. But coaches are on the road and really all over nationally, as well as Louisiana. But Brian Kelly, I've heard, will stay around here to touch on a lot of the Louisiana commits because he wants to be able to spend a lot of time around the ops building where he's talking to kids about staying, going pro, hitting the portal, whatever it might be. Ultimately, he has those final conversations with them. So it's a balancing act right now between the portal, looking at guys, which Brian Kelly also obviously is going to be sitting back in ops, watching a lot of film or whatever it might be, talking to people about portal targets and who they might want to add. But you're balancing all these coaches being on the road, signing day in 2 weeks, the transfer portal being open, your guys in your position may be entering, maybe not, guys at your position going into the portal that you might need to, get after. It is a unprecedented couple of weeks now that we officially have a portal window of 45 days.
Yeah, absolutely. And lucky for the LSU staff, they play on January 2nd. So they can kind of go balls to the wall, so to speak, on this recruiting, whether it be transfers or high school, to kind of prioritize those guys and make them feel, hey, comfortable about signing here early, or go check on guys who are maybe you want to keep a close eye on. I'm sure they'll go see Dalen Austin at some point, who, by the way, shout out Dalen, tagged me, well, didn't tag me, but put an Instagram out about married to the game, and I was interviewing him. So that was a nice surprise that Shea found this morning on Instagram.
You're the game.
Yeah. So, this is a busy time. And also, I mean, as these guys enter the portal, Kelly's got to be there to boom, watch film. It'll go right to the position coaches, and then they'll make a move on guys that they want to. So you got to have some flexibility in this early week. And then next week's going to be absolutely insane before the early signing period begins on December 21st, runs through December 23rd. We'll have you guys covered. Lots to come on coaches on the road. But those are a few guys that LSU went and saw or are about to see this week. We'll have more on that later on as they get real active. Couple official visitors that we're going to highlight for you guys as well. This is going to be one of those weekends.
Are we not giving away the whole list, Billy? Or I was about to just start railing them off right now, and then you just said a couple. There's more than two.
We are not giving away the whole list. We are giving away the commits, Shea D, where that is the plan right now.
All right. Well, if they read the site, then they could see one of the other or both of the other ones. They're written in the story.
Exactly. That's why they got to go to the story. We got to tease a little bit. We give away the official visitors pretty much every week on this podcast. Time to play a little hardball. The one to watch is what we'll hold back, but the one uncommitted prospect.
Okay, that's fair, because that prospect actually shared publicly that he is visiting this weekend.
Exactly. So let's run it down, Shea. Who do you want to lead off with on the official visit weekend?
Okay, so we'll start at the top. And look, I'll reset the stage for you guys. They did a really good job of kind of making this work this way. They have 23 commits. Every out-of-state commit minus Christian Braithwaite out of Texas, who was the most recent out-of-state commitment, he'll be on campus next weekend. So they only have 2 more weekends you can have official visitors. He'll come next weekend. So basically every out-of-state commit is accounted for. So here at the end, you're only having to get the in-state guys in. So heavy on in-state, both this weekend and next weekend. And next weekend is when the rest of the guys will come in. But I think starting at the top, it's a good idea to bring your 2 offensive tackles, 5-star offensive tackle Zalance Hurd, 4-star offensive tackle Tyree Adams, both ranked inside the top 10 at offensive tackle by On3. A Neville guy, a St. Aug guy, a couple of big-time programs in Louisiana. You have them around each other. They probably to have already built on that camaraderie, but they'll be in the O-line room together as tackles for the foreseeable future once they both get to campus. And good to see them both get there. And notable, Zalance Hurd, he's a 5-star. Trust me, a lot of colleges were trying to flip him along the way. A lot of colleges were saying, hey, come visit here in the last weekend. Tyree Adams was publicly going to visit a number of colleges, Florida, Ole Miss, LSU. He just said he wanted to have fun and enjoy it. He winds up shutting it down. LSU is the visit this weekend, and then nothing from there is what he told you. So I think that's a good start. You want offensive tackles. Those are your two in this class. You've got them on a visit just a couple weeks before signing day, and very much appears that they are not interested in looking elsewhere.
Yeah, and I'll note that obviously state championships are this weekend in Louisiana too. Peter Rauderkus will be on hand in the Dome for us. I'll be up watching Ryan Yates try to punch his ticket to the state championship in Texas this weekend. And then as well, Colin Simmons and Kadavian Dotson Walker, two big-time 2024 prospects that are on LSU's radar, will be playing as well, that I'll be catching up with. Look, they also... And I was going with that to say, I really wish the Lance Hurd and Neville would have made it so we could have seen the Kalaj Cobbins and Destrehan matchup there. But hey, can't always get what you want. Ruston, very, very good team going up against Destrehan this weekend. We kind of move down the list now. We go on the defensive side of the ball for a couple here. Ashton Stamps out of Rummel High School. He also said that he is shut down and he is going to sign early. Not too much of a surprise there, but he's now set to take his official visit this weekend, as well as Sandoval edge prospect Dylan Carpenter is going to be on campus as well. LSU had just flipped him from the Raging Cajuns. And so those are the two defensive guys that'll be coming in this weekend. And then finally, they just saw him, went in home with him on Monday night. Caleb Jackson, the 4-star running back out of Baton Rouge, is going to be on campus. So those are the commitments that are coming in town. And now it's time to unveil, or I guess talk about the one public target that they're going to host. There's another one in that story on the site that you can go check out some more details on. But let's talk about Miamisburg, Ohio. Tight end Jackson McGohan, a now former Cincinnati commit, is set to visit LSU this weekend. Things are looking really good here for the Tigers.
Yeah, and we will see if Wisconsin and Fickle don't try to make a move to get him aboard here late in the game. He talked about them, how much affinity he has for that staff. He was committed to them, and kind of even said, hey, look, I could maybe end up at Wisconsin. At the same time, Billy, you did an article where Jackson McGohan told you kind of the story of, hey, Mike Denbrock, LSU's offensive coordinator, was at Cincinnati as the OC. Whenever I was being recruited by them initially, he offered me. He coaches the tight ends. He coaches the tight ends at LSU as well. And they had a good relationship. Well, then he obviously, Denbrock goes to LSU, now back at Cincinnati. Right around that same time, McGohan commits to the Bearcats. He stayed committed all the way through the coaching change. And the day they hired Satterfield, right, was the day that McGohan decommitted. Regardless, it doesn't appear that he's going back to Cincinnati. We put in our RPM picks on LSU just because he received an offer a week ago. A few days later, he decommits. And then a few days later after that, he's on LSU's campus. You can't line it up that better. Then toss in the fact that your offensive coordinator and tight ends coach was actually the coach that recruited him to the school he just decommitted from. Stars align in my mind there. If he's got a good visit this weekend and his family comes and everybody feels good about it, I would think that is one that ends up going LSU's way, because one position they can sell right now is tight end. They need them, and he appears to be a pretty good prospect you could potentially add here late in the game when you don't have a ton of options still out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got the updated measurables, 6'4", 232. He's got some really, really impressive catches on his highlight tape, was very productive. I think he was just shy of 1,000 yards as a senior here. And if a lot of you probably don't watch much Cincinnati football, but one position that Cincinnati has been loaded at year in, year out is tight end. So I really trust the evaluations there on that front too. And like you said, Mike Denbrock was there and was honestly the coach that he committed to. And he just kind of stayed with that and stayed true to where he was going to go, despite Mike Denbrock heading off to LSU. So I like him. He's an 89 on 3. Who knows as we dive in, where he could end up. But we think highly of him. I mean, we think of him basically as somebody that, has a chance to end up being a pro.
Be a multi-year starter. Yeah, multi-year starter, NFL
starter.
potential.
So, he's got that size that you really like and the production to boot in high school. He's also really good friends with 2024 LSU tight end commit Tavion Galloway, who's already been in his ear as well. about joining him in Baton Rouge down the line, or I guess Tavion would join Jackson in Baton Rouge eventually, being he's in the class of 2024. So with that, group of official visitors coming in, big visit weekend on deck next weekend. Shea, we've talked a lot about some of the guys that they'll bring in, but Desmond Ricks, 5-star defensive back, is one of those guys that's set his visit schedule. He's fresh off a Florida visit. He is headed to Alabama this weekend, and then he'll end with LSU. So a big visitor next weekend is Desmond Ricks. They'll also have 4-star safety Isaac Smith, who's made his intentions known, at least as of now, on campus. He's set to visit Mississippi State, I believe, this weekend. Those are two key targets down the stretch. And Desmond Ricks caught up with Corey Bender his mom caught up with Corey Bender about his official visit to Florida. Look, I think that's one that, we've talked about on the site. LSU sits in a good spot, but I think we could see ebbs and flows here, but you've got to trust that, LSU has that last visit for a reason. They're trying to finish that one off and land him on December 22nd when he announces.
A cornerback, especially a freshman cornerback, not necessarily another grad transfer who only gives you a year. Someone like Desmond Ricks is a massive priority here down the stretch because you have to rebuild the cornerback room, maybe more than any other room on the team. You want to get back to recruiting guys like Desmond Ricks who are not only early impact, they stay 3 years, you really potentially 4, obviously, but you really get a lot of football out of them, and you're not having to worry year over year to who's going to start, how do we go find a starter, whatever it might be. So I think that's one of the biggest recruitments to watch. And we've said it, and everyone seems to agree that we talked to. Entering this stretch, LSU leads. LSU's the team to beat, however you want to say it. But Florida just knocked down their first visit. As you noted, Bama's this next visit, then LSU, then he signs midweek after LSU. So we are kind of like in the very middle, right? Almost to the midway point of what we consider to be the most important stretch of visits for Desmond Ricks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then happened Friday night as I was out watching South Oak Cliff and Melissa battle it out. 2024 4-star defensive end Nigel Smith, who's an LSU target, was out there running around, looked the part. But Javian Toviano announced his commitment date, December 15th.
And that's a week before signing day. So he's taking a center stage here by himself.
And I think one thing that was noted to me by somebody close to recruitment was that he wants to have his high school classmates around. So I guess they're still in school. So I think that was kind of the goal. But I haven't gotten the plans from the announcement yet. Going to be there no matter what for Javian Toviano to make that announcement. The final 5 are Georgia, which is a big surprise. In that final 5, the Bulldogs had kind of almost gone their separate ways from what Javian had told us over the summer. And they hadn't really popped up as of late. Michigan, LSU, Texas, and Texas A&M. So drop some notes and thoughts on that Saturday morning on thebengaltiger.com as far as where things stand. But look, I mean, unless he quietly officially visits somewhere, this is just kind of what we talked about. It just seems like it's got to be LSU, right?
He visited no other college campus this season, I should say, except LSU. He brought more and more family with him every trip. He visited 3 times, ultimately, if you include the Bayou Splash, in late July, August. He went to a neutral site game for Texas. He went to a neutral site game for A&M. Never reportedly went to either of those campuses. Never took the Michigan or Ohio State trips. There were some that he was talking about taking. Never took those. Just buckled in on football. Would continue to pop in at LSU. No-showed at Texas on their biggest recruiting weekend of the year. Everyone we've talked to, Billy, and this comes directly, I'll paraphrase what his LSU source, who very much has knowledge of this recruitment, said, is it's almost like we all look around and say, if he's not coming here, then this is the wildest recruitment ever, because everything has pointed to LSU except for the fact that Javian has never said which teams are actually like the teams to beat, the team out front. They have a lead. Nothing. He just says nice things about everyone and continues about his business, which I'm not hating on. I love it. I think it's better than, being all over social media and, always pretending one team's out front, but I tricked everybody. he hasn't said anything, and that's leaving all of us, even coaching staffs, like, we know Texas, we know like other staffs are like, man, I've talked to people who up in sources in the building, and they don't know kind of anything about it. They don't know what he's going to do. So this will be interesting. If he picks LSU, nobody's surprised at all. If he doesn't, it's like one of the biggest shocks of this cycle.
Completely agree. Well said. Lastly, Jordan Hall, defensive tackle, top 50 prospect LSU had on an official visit earlier this year, also said his commitment date for December 22nd. He is going to decide. LSU is in the mix there. Florida, Georgia, Alabama. I would say right now, I mean, just kind of reading the tea leaves, I think LSU did a really good job with their official visit. I think they gave him a lot to think about. It's just hard not to see him ending up at Georgia at this point with the Bulldogs getting the last official visit. Jamar Cain's still going to work this one until the end, but it's just one that the tea leaves don't point to LSU at this point with what we're hearing. But again, he has a whole week or so, week and a half roughly, after that Georgia official visit where the dust is going to settle and eventually he'll decide. And we'll see. Maybe it's a shocker, across the board. Maybe he could go elsewhere from Georgia. But right now, Georgia has the clear buzz here, as he's already set his commitment date as well.
Completely agree. They need defensive tackles. We're seeing them offering them in the portal. This was a big one late in the game that Jamar Cain kind of stuck with and got him to visit, as you noted. The rest of his DT targets really all visited in the summer and ultimately committed to other schools or committed to LSU in Deron Reed's case. Then he flipped to Auburn. So they're sort of seeing who will bite here late. And look, you swing for the fences. If you're putting odds on those four teams, you're getting very nice plus odds on LSU right now. It's probably not going to happen, but if it does, it'd be considered a nice surprise. We'll see ultimately how it plays out. But I think you summed it up well. I think it's probably Georgia or Bama.
Yeah, I would be surprised at this stage if it was not the Dogs, but LSU is going to keep swinging away. There are in-home visits to go as well on that front, so we'll see how LSU, goes about that, and also if they get Brian Kelly involved, if they feel good enough to try and make that big final pitch. So, with that, guys, we're going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. A lot more to come on the site. We've got to get back to writing. There's a lot of things to come. I know we've got tidbits to come on Coaches on the Road. Shea has some more tidbits to drop after Keyshawn Butte kind of blew up our night last night. So a lot more to come on thebengaltiger.com. Be sure to check us out with that $1 for a year subscription. Shea, you got anything else?
No, I'm good to go. See, Remember, Thursday, Friday, check back one of the days later in the week, refresh the YouTube, the Spotify, the Apple, whatever you're doing. In the first edition of the Transfer Portal Pod will be out.
Yep.
We'll be rocking.
More reason why to subscribe to the Bengal Tiger YouTube. Just one click at the top of this little box or whatever, right below our YouTube title of the podcast. So hit that subscribe button for us and get the notifications when a new pod goes on the air. So for Shea Dixon, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. We'll catch you next time.